We're so obsessed with labeling behavior, but it's behavior we haven't even stopped to try and understand from a compassionate viewpoint. Instead, we see the behavior and it hurts us. So then we reach the conclusion that they must be hurtful. Because you hurt me, you must be hurtful. Because I feel controlled, you're controlling. Because I feel made fun of, you're a bully. So we invent these labels that are actually a distortion of their truth. Their truth is that they're hurting and yearning. For people who really want to heal, we need to tap into something deeper, the essence of the human heart.
James Fish Gill on the podcast today. Beautiful man. He really is a heart-led coach. You can feel it when you communicate with this man, or when you listen, when you have any sort of interaction with him. He is truly embodying a lot of the messages that he puts out there. He's got an amazing Instagram account. He puts out valuable, really useful, practical information about how to navigate relationships. We dive into some amazing stuff here. It was such a joy to sit down with him and talk about skillful communication and how we can improve all the aspects of our relationships. And we get to know James and his backstory and why he cares so much about this work. Enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you find it valuable. Interact with us in the comments, and me or James will definitely endeavour to get back to you. Appreciate you. Enjoy the episode. Yeah, so I'd love to know your early life, because as you're aware, the more you dive into this work, it's like that inner fish always has the answers, right? He holds all the wisdom and all the keys to understand ourselves greater. So
yeah, really.
Is that something?
Really?
Is that something you known early on? Like, oh, okay, I need to understand who I am, or go back to those early years and understand what patterns are played out.
I haven't really, I'm not the kind of person who gets super fascinated by, I need to understand why I am the way I am. I need to kind of go and work out where this shit comes from and why. And I don't tend to be fascinated by the analysis of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say more for me, as various situations in my life unfolded different to how I wanted them, particularly relationship breakdowns, I just started to get a bit curious about, I wonder what's going on in me that I can't see. And then naturally I just started to get kind of trace it back and go, wow, Little Fish is definitely still alive and often running the show. And when I can tune into that, when I can accept that that's the case, things just go better, because then I can just tend to him. Because he has a lot of unconscious ways of trying to meet his needs that don't go very well.
Yeah.
But the needs are so valid, right? The needs are so valid. And I'm actually the only one who can tend to those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of been more my perspective recently.
Yeah.
Just like, how do I care for that little guy who's actually often driving?
Yeah, for sure. Could you let me in on some big kind of life moments that you're happy to talk about that really have shaped your path and moving forward? Like, what big moments would I need to know if I was to get to know you better?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to talk about them now? Or?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Divorce from my ex-wife after 15 years of being together and having two wonderful, now young adults as kids, was massively impactful. I think just was a classic breakdown in communication about things that felt so complex and so nuanced. And I wish that back then I had the tools that I now have and teach, because we just would have been more masterful at loving each other and meeting unmet needs without becoming oppositional in doing so. So that was kind of a critical moment. I've experienced a lot of loss over my life, a lot of loss to cancer and suicide. So I've lost some very dear people, there's actually a photo of me and my ex-wife on our wedding day. She and I are really good friends now and have done an amazing job at standing in a place of love now. But there's a photo of me and her on our wedding day. And the three people in the photo with us, all of whom gave the speeches at our wedding, are all dead.
Wow.
And, this is only kind of 15 years ago. So there's been a lot of loss, and loss has actually opened my eyes to what being able to grieve well affords us, like really being able to hold myself through enormous grief has actually just expanded the container of who I am, so that what I can hold now, the emotions I can be with now, I just don't have a sense of overwhelm anymore. I often feel, often feel sad, often feel worried, but none of it kind of spills over the edges, because I think the container got bigger through learning how to grieve. I had a really difficult breakdown of my second major relationship because I was unfaithful. I was texting another woman, and those texts came into view for my partner at the time, and it just utterly broke her heart. And that was the beginning of me realizing that there were kind of two me's. Like, there was a schism. There was the me that I wanted to be seen as, and then there was the kind of secret me, trying to kind of desperately feel what I wanted to feel, but hiding it from people, particularly people closest to me. And that was to walk through that amount of shame, because, my whole community was impacted. And I just had to walk through years of feeling like a really bad man, until I could discover something that was a bit more true than I'm just a bad man.
Have you understood why those two sides were there?
Yeah, well, I really had to tune into what were the unmet needs that I was seeking to get met, and make a distinction between having, very unskillfully going about trying to meet my own needs, as distinct from I'm bad. And that showed me the root of shame is actually it's a decision. It's a decision that we make about ourselves unconsciously. Anyway, to find that liberation in myself through also having the deepest compassion towards her, and having to deal with the fact that she eventually cut me out of her life forever, like blocked on all forms of communication, which now I recognize to just be the most beautiful expression of her yearning for safety.
That's a big reframe.
Not without. What was that?
That's a big reframe right there, just to honor that.
Yeah, I mean, like, she has done a magnificent job that's the extent to which she needed to create.
Yeah.
That's the extent of her pain, that's what she needed to try and create safety. And I imagine, and I don't know, but I really imagine that she still sits with a lot of upset and a lot of hurt. I imagine that won't go anywhere necessarily, or maybe it will. But to wrap my loving awareness around her pain, while I could also tend to the beautiful, tender yearning in the little fish's heart behind what I did, was a huge learning for me, to be able to hold those two things and to not have to resort to I'm bad or some other, if I'm not at fault, who is at fault? Is it my dad? Is it, it's so to not need to resort to blame. I mean, my whole, everything I do is about dissolving blame and right and wrong. So that was enormously powerful. And then a little more recently, a few years ago, I just went through, I won't go into it, but I went through a very painful situation where the loss of a relationship was totally out of my hands. A tragic event happened in her life. And I madly, madly clung on to the sense that I could love her better. And I couldn't. And I got to see the strength of my love, like how fiercely I can love. And also I got to really tend to the what I would call the anxious side of myself. I finally got to hold myself in a way that I never have before. And that insight actually showed me that yeah, I've never realized, but only I actually can hold myself, because only I know the depth to which I need to be held.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit more about that, about holding yourself and what that would feel
Yeah,
like?
yeah, I know it sounds like just mumbo jumbo, doesn't it? But for
Not
me,
not
it
to
looked
me,
like
maybe for people.
yeah. Well,
I
it's
feel
it's
like I
yeah, it
understand.
can mean good. I'm glad you asked me to do this, because I
Mm,
find it really difficult the extent to which personal growth or spiritual development is kind of cloaked in
mm,
buzzwords. So
mm-hmm,
for me, holding myself was really tuning into what I was feeling, the depth of my grief, the tuning into the depth of my anger, actually calling on mentors who could guide me to um, start to identify and express the range of emotions, the very incongruent range of emotions that I was feeling after the end of that relationship. Um, and recognizing that prior to that, I was invested in relationship because I was wanting to be held by someone. I was wanting to be loved. And I hadn't developed the capacity to feel fondly towards myself. And that 2.5 year period was really about growing my capacity to really find myself wonderful, to really start to look upon myself with high regard, um, regardless of circumstance, regardless of what was to be achieved or how much money or like anything external.
mm,
And then all the way down to, for probably 2 years, I would go to sleep and I would tuck myself up in bed and I'd hold my own hand and I would say things. I would just, I would use the same tools of validation that I teach people for themselves and for whoever they're in conflict with. And I would just say, it makes sense that you feel this way, Fish, and I'm here. So, a lot of the ways that we tend to habitually respond to pain is trying to dismiss it, wondering why it's there, trying to analyze it, trying to fix it, trying to compare it, trying to decide whose fault it is. None of that is tending to our pain. All of that is trying to push the pain away as if pain is bad. And so I just developed these little personal practices where I would just say, of course, you've got pain.
mm.
No opposition to the pain, no needing to work out where it came from or what to do with it or how to fix it or, whether or not it should exist. Just simply, I can see the extent to which you're deeply sad right now, and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I found myself thinking, God, am I still upset about this? I would lie down, hold my hand and say, but of course you are.
Mm.
And and something was happening in those little practices day in, day out. I couldn't notice it day by day. But now I look back and go, wow, it was like I was being my dad for me, or my mum for me, or actually kind of both. I was just going, we're here for you. And of course you're suffering. And there was something incredibly soothing about that, more soothing than anything anyone else could do for me on the planet ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we all could have a bit of that if we were truly honest
Yeah.
with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a big one. It's the biggest. It's. I'd like to know how you.
And we madly want that from others.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But I can feel the depth to which I need validation.
Mm-hmm. How do you? How did you guide yourself back to that truth? And how do you do that for others now? I imagine it's one of the same kind of thing. How do you guide people back to that truth? Because I feel like we're our biggest you know, we pull the wool over our own eyes, and we it's really sometimes hard to get to know the truth of the matter, whether it is us, whether it is that need for validation and soothing and love, self-care, and or if it is actually because people are at different levels, and it's really hard to understand whether for some people it's like it is them or it is other people, you know. Is it always us? Somewhat.
You mean what, the reason for the pain? Is that what you mean?
Potentially, yeah. Like why we look outside of ourselves for the reason we're not feeling well, or we're doing the things we're doing because of other people, or because the world is the way it is, you know, or
Yeah. Yeah, well, I tell you what, the way that I work is kind of it's sort of none of that. It's sort of not looking for why. Um, I make a very strong distinction in all the work that I do with my clients, the distinction between analysis and experience. And we're not masterful at recognizing our experience. And we are obsessed, both personally because of the way the mind works, and culturally because we're a collection of minds. We are obsessed with our analysis. So to give you an example, I was working with someone fairly recently who came to me and just said, "Can I work with you on this relationship with my sister-in-law?" And I said, "Sure, tell me what's going on." And she was like, "Well, my sister-in-law is just such a kind of a cold, uncaring bitch when it comes to me. And I've been through all this difficulty in my life recently, and she hasn't once reached out to me. And she's actually a very kind and caring person in the world. So why is she such a bitch to me?" So can you hear the analysis in that? That behavior over there equals she's a such and such. And, that takes all forms, but let's just kind of stay with this form at the moment. And when I said to her, "Okay, well, let's start, this is where I always start. I say, let's start with, what was that like for you? Like, talk to me about, I'm going to give you as much time as you need to start to talk to me about the pain that you're in. What's that like for you that she doesn't do what you want? What's it like for you that it doesn't seem like she doesn't care?" And this woman is sitting in front of me going, "Oh, well, it's not like I'm upset about it. Like, she's a busy person, and it's not like I'm not the kind of person to get all kind of het up about something like that. But what a bitch." So this is the way in which we tend to not want to recognize the experience that's alive in us in favor of creating some analysis about them or the situation. It's much more comfortable for us, it seems, to reach a conclusion about someone than it is to say, when that person didn't call me, I felt sad. There's something a little unusual for us about that. Many of us have been trained out of that approach. It's seen as like being self-pitying or whatever to actually recognize your upset. But the power of recognizing our upset is that we can actually simply go, I have every right to feel what I felt in response to what they did. So, one of the things that I work on is skilling others and myself constantly in becoming masterful at recognizing and tending to our own pain. And by tending to, I just mean like we tend to a garden. We do what we need to do. We recognize that. We nurture this, we water that. We just like tend to it like it's our emotional garden. And there's pain in the garden. So what do we want to do? Let's sit by that bush today and let's paint it tomorrow and let's whatever, tend to the garden. And that's really unfamiliar to people. And it even feels to people as if I'm telling them to be wrong about their analysis. But their analysis is actually it springs from their pain.
Yeah.
It's an unskillful expression of their pain.
I don't think we want to feel. It's ultimately it,
No,
isn't it? We don't want to
no,
feel. We just don't want to go there
no.
to
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe we don't want to, or maybe we've just never been shown how to.
Mm,
So even tasting it, even starting to recognize pain feels like overwhelm for us. My beautiful daughter, her mum and I used to love playing fairly melancholic folk music like Nick Drake, right?
mhm,
And our daughter would be like, "Oh, can you turn this sad music off?" And I've had conversations with her more recently about how she tends to feel, as soon as something feels like it's on the verge of sadness, it
mhm,
feels like a bit like an abyss or a cliff. It's like, what's going to happen if I really feel this? And I think that's the extent to which we have been either trained out of or just simply not trained in recognizing and tending to our own emotional landscape. And
mhm,
as men, maybe you'll agree with this, but as men, all I see day in, day out, I see it in women too, by the way. But as men, I see that we have specifically been trained out of that in order to be soldiers and businessmen and like slay the dragon. Don't look inwards and communicate what you find there, because you won't be able to slay the dragon.
mhm.
you know
Yeah, yeah. It
um
there have been times where it would have got us killed to show
mm,
emotion, to put your hand up and
yeah,
say, "I'm feeling a bit anxious about this. I don't want to go to war." It's like, yeah,
yeah,
okay, you sit this one out. That's not going to happen. It's
yeah, exactly. In the I don't know what school was like for you, but I would have virtually been killed if I'd shown some of my vulnerabilities at school.
yeah, 100%.
I would have been set upon by guys who just wanted to kind of like toughen me up and
Hmm.
or jostle for status. And so I kept it all very on the low. And I would even consider that I was fairly depressed in high school, the last few years of high school, but I kept it very hidden from everyone.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so that's one of the approaches, is to get masterful at keep on translating my analysis back into the experience that lies underneath it.
Hmm. So what's
And
on
I
the
also invite my clients to do that with others, because anything that comes, any communication that comes to us in conflict will usually be analysis. And we normally push away that analysis with our counter analysis, and that's how conflict escalates effortlessly. But if I can listen to someone's analysis and hear the pain and the yearning behind their analysis and meet them there, they open magically.
Hmm.
Yeah. So analysis calls for counter analysis, and it leads us deeper into opposition. That's kind of the job of analysis. When you think about it, analyzing something is to declare this, not that. So there's distinction being made. So no wonder it creates opposition for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it's then how we hold that and how we navigate that when we have analyzed and we have concluded based on analysis that we disagree or we are different, or the truth is that we
Yeah.
just aren't on each other's side on this point. But
Yeah. Well,
let's
and
just
if the truth is analysis. Sorry, you go.
yeah. And I just wanted to say on this point, what's on the other side of that? Like when okay, you've got people's attention, that they're willing to go a bit deeper. They're going to analyze. I want to say analyze, but they want to go into this a bit more, and they're like, okay, but what's on the other side of that? What's my motivation to do that for someone that just is not? It doesn't do this sort of thing. Like, what's on the other side of getting to understand?
Our emotions.
Hmm.
What's on the other side of learning to tend to my emotions is relief, actually. So I watch people start off fairly kind of awkwardly at still coming back into their analysis. No, that person's a bully, that person's controlling, that person's whatever external projection of analysis. And as they become more masterful at saying, I recognize I felt really hurt. I see that I felt really sad. I actually realize that probably underneath that is fear. I've noticed quite often with that person, I feel unloved. Once we can start to recognize that and begin to validate it, begin to not have to push it away, not have to shift it, change it, fix it, compare it, over time, people start to go, oh, I'm just feeling better. I just feel better that for the last 5 minutes, I've actually just got to recognize that I was fearful and sad. And now I don't feel as fearful and sad just by recognizing it and not having to put it anywhere, not having to do anything about it. So, when we bring our loving awareness to our emotions, something shifts. There's an energetic shift. Quite likely in the next minute or two we'll be like, oh, I don't feel so sad right now. Again, I've just brought my awareness to it and now something shifted. So in short, relief. But, I don't work with people in isolation. I work with them in terms of their most important relationships, which are sometimes their most difficult relationships as well. So as we become masterful at tending to our own emotional experience, we become more masterful at doing the same for others. So if you and I are in conflict and you're throwing all your horrible accusations at me, and I'm tempted to just go, you're a nutcase, and I'm just going to take out a restraining order and never see you again, and let's leave it at that, which is still locked in opposition. And if instead I can say, underneath your analysis, I can hear that actually I've left you feeling incredibly heartbroken, maybe super embarrassed. It might have feel as if you were being belittled. It felt to you as if I was absolutely insensitive to your own needs, and that would have been like heartbreaking for you. As soon as I can start to reach into the emotional truth that your analysis is springing from, what do you think happens to your analysis? It just quietens.
Yeah.
Because your analysis is your unskillful attempt to have your emotional experience recognized. So if I just cut out the middleman where we just fire abuse at each other, and if I go straight into the emotion that I think you might be expressing, you go, hallelujah. Finally, he's willing to become aware of my experience.
Mm-hmm. When is it? Sorry. when is it important to label? When is it important? When is there room to say this person is actually being this way and that is affecting me? Like, is there room for that in this discussion?
Well, a more skillful way of doing that is to say, the way this person is behaving is causing me upset that I'm not okay with. Mm-hmm. What we find, though, when we become really skillful is what that person was actually hoping for behind what they did is distinct from my pain. So there's what they were hoping for, what they were yearning for, which might even have been for me to taste their pain so they felt cared for. That's kind of their yearning behind what we might term malicious intent.
Sure.
They were hoping for something as distinct from my pain, and both of those things are true. So skillfully, the unskillful way that you went about trying to feel what you needed to feel left me feeling what I'm not okay to be feeling, right? So I'm not okay with what you're doing because I'm not okay with the pain it brings me. And I can see that you didn't want pain for me. And that might sound confusing to start with, but that is the very crux of conscious communication. Mm-hmm. Every painful situation you've ever received, someone was wanting something distinct from your pain. And if we turn that around, which it becomes a little more palatable when we turn it around. And if I said to you, Chris, think of some of the shittiest things that you've ever done or said. And And then I would encourage you to get very clear about what your beautiful, tender heart was actually yearning for. That those actions and words were just an unskillful expression of. The pain that you created is real, but it's distinct from what you were hoping to create.
Yeah. I had this amazing thought experiment one day when I was walking down the street. I remember exactly where I was, and I was thinking, remember me at my worst. Like, just take one day, one moment where I was at my worst, and I was horrible. I was not kind. I was thoughtless, careless, like rude, just obnoxious, arrogant. And that just one moment. Imagine and play that out when you meet someone who is like that. And it
Yeah.
got me thinking, like, yeah, like I just see them in their pain. I
Yeah.
really do. Like I'm on your team. But I love to kind of counter these things, because I know a lot of people that counter with me, and it's useful to dive deeper when this
Yeah.
starts to become, perhaps, and you might hear this a lot, like toxic positivity, and like when
Yeah.
like it kind of brings us on nicely, because I'd love to ask you and get your take on, like, us as humans. Like, do we come into this world just striving for connection, to be loved, to be accepted, to be seen, heard? Is that our true nature? Because it feels like that's what we're getting at here, and that is what everyone. It doesn't make things people do okay, of course, and that's not what you're
Oh,
saying. But I'd love to get your kind of take on what you see as, like, things playing out for people that are, let's say, labeling narcissistic, or all these terms that we can
yeah.
use.
Yeah. Beautiful. Just before I sort of go onto that about the essence of humanity, I think I love
Yeah.
that question. Like, who are we at our truest nature? To come back to your question, which I didn't answer, where's there room for labeling?
Mm-hmm.
I think labeling is a magnificent strategy if we want to create separation. So as soon as I call you a bully, you think, well, that's crap. I'm not a bully. And so immediately we've created opposition between us, and that creates distance. So if what you want in your life is separation and opposition and alienation, you should definitely label as much as possible. Now, where that might come into like a valid approach for some people are in so much pain because of something that's happened, or many hundreds of things that have happened in a relationship, that to label that person as a such and such is the first moment where they can create enough separation to feel safe. So I would encourage them to go ahead and do that. And those people won't ever work with me until they get to a different place, because to those people who are needing to label to create separation to feel safe, to feel like it's not my fault and I'm okay here, to those people, my work sounds like I'm blaming the victim. I'm dismissing their pain and say, you're wrong about the pain that you've got. That person's a good person. You're wrong about the pain. And that's that's never my message. In fact, as we spoke about before, I ask people to get masterful at recognizing and tending to their pain rather than dismissing it. So I would suggest go ahead and label if the outcome that you want is opposition between me and you, and separation and distance. And, there's a safety in that. However, for people who really want to heal, we need to tap into something deeper, the essence of the human heart. So if I go back to, what was it, teenage Chris, who was doing all those crazy things, horrible things, let's look at what was his pain. I mean, to whatever extent you want to share with us, what that behavior our behavior springs from the pain that we're in and what our heart is yearning for. So let's start with the pain you were in. What was some of the pain that was alive for you that naturally gave rise to your actions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Let's do this. There was a lot of feelings around being alone, I'd say. Not having someone I could
Yeah.
be myself with. So feeling
Yeah.
like a character that I was playing out, which wasn't really me. So it was like there was separation there, like real separation from
Yeah.
me and feeling accepted.
Yeah. So I felt unaccepted. I felt alone. Did you feel confused? Did you feel angry at the world for what you were seeming to be asked to be that didn't feel real or authentic or understood? Were there people in your life you were angry
I
towards?
think the anger was really hidden and not, I wasn't aware of it, and it would come out when I would be very drunk, or be out of
Yeah.
like in that capacity of like being unconscious, and it would
Yeah.
play out in those situations.
Yeah. Beautiful. Which, by the way, it's really funny when I'm coaching a client to tune into what they're experiencing. Where we get to often is that they will say, yeah, actually, there's anger in there, definitely. But where we start off with, people generally say, I'm not angry. I'm not an angry person. Like there is this disdain or distaste towards having anger, as if particularly men. It's
Yeah.
like having anger makes you a bad man. But also for women, having anger makes you like seen as a crazy bitch. So I'm not angry. But actually, think of all the reasons that we might validly have anger. Like it's infinite. Of course, we're angry. I would be deeply surprised if every human being on the planet didn't have some degree of anger, because our boundaries have been transgressed. We haven't always felt in control of what's happening to us, right? Anyway, so that's the pain that was alive for Chris underneath what he was doing and saying. And I imagine that you might have created upset for people in your life, and they're impacted by the behaviors. So they're just going to say, well, Chris is out of control, or he's selfish, or he's nasty, or he's, whatever, right? So they'll give a label to the behavior because they can't quite feel into the depth of your upset. And by the way, neither could you. And also, what is your beautiful, tender heart, like the very essence of you, the essence of you that has kind of flourished now into what you do, which was still alive in you back then. What were you really yearning for? Behind that behavior, what were you hoping for? What were you needing? What pain did you want understood? What validation did you need? What were your yearnings?
I think it was really around friendship.
Yeah.
Friendship, connection, and just more love.
Yeah. I was yearning for love and friendship and connection. I was yearning to be understood. I was aching for this loneliness to end. And so when you can understand what your heart is yearning for and what your heart is suffering with, the behavior that springs from that, which I'm still going to say is unskillful and needs tending to, right? It's still not okay for the world to get that Chris just doing what he wants. So I'm not saying we should forgive the behavior. We're just seeking to understand it and recognize that the behavior is just a symptom of yearning and pain. Because then I can come to Chris when he's hurling abuse at me, and I can say, it would make sense to me if you felt incredibly lonely and angry, and maybe even angry about some things that I've said or done to you. And I'm here for you. And I can see the extent to which you need to feel understood by me. And I imagine that you just want kind of the isolation to end. And I'm right here for you. And that approach, which is just my heart feeling into your heart, because our hearts are actually not that different. I know loneliness. I know anger. If I can reach into your experience, or at least guess your experience and indicate that I'm curious about what's going on for you, it's the absence of me saying, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
See, back in the old model, I've just looked at your behavior and said, you're just one of those assholes.
Yeah.
It's such a
It's
common notion
yeah.
out there in the world that some people are just assholes.
It's true. And I do want to stay on this point. I think back to my experience, I did have that. Like it's resonating that I had teachers, I had parents, friends that were like that. I think there was the trust there that I just didn't have. Like I just didn't trust
Yeah.
people. So that really roots back
Yeah.
even further.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're so busy, we're so obsessed with labeling behavior, but it's behavior we haven't even stopped to try and understand from a compassionate viewpoint. Instead, we see the behavior and it hurts us. So then we reach the conclusion that they must be hurtful.
Mm-hmm. So do you?
Because you hurt me,
Yeah.
you must be hurtful. Because I feel controlled, you're controlling. Because I feel made fun of, you're a bully. So we invent these labels that are actually a distortion of their truth. Their truth is that they're hurting and yearning. Always. Every human being hurts and yearns for things to be better.
Mm-hmm. Do you meet a lot
So
of?
I'm not excusing
Do you
behavior.
meet resistance in this? Do people really push back when they're like they feel like you are justifying their behavior, or does it get kind of murky that ground when you're really trying to
I'm
focus on the communication?
Yeah. So when you're in a program where I'm giving you the tools and you get the context of the whole thing and you get how committed I am to supporting you in the pain that you're in, right? So the idea that I'm actually dismissing your pain starts to evaporate, right, when you're in a program. But on Instagram, I have to make chicken nugget sized variations of the whole healthy meal.
Yeah.
And I get messages from people all the time saying, how dare you excuse narcissistic behavior? How dare you blame victims? Because in a 60-second video, I can't quite point to all the nuances of a deeply radically compassionate approach to them and to us, both directions. So I tend to post on either compassion towards them or compassion towards us, because to express both at the same time is I'd need, half an hour, not 60 seconds.
Hopefully what we've done
So
here.
yeah, it does really, it gets under people's skin, because here's the thing, we have this binary function in the mind that either says, am I condoning or am I condemning? And if there's difficult behavior ahead, I must condemn it, because if I don't condemn it, then I'm condoning it.
Yeah. When you don't go on.
The work that I do is neither condemning nor condoning. It's actually more skillful. It's recognizing the truth underneath the behavior. I'm recognizing the pain I'm in and recognizing that what you are actually hoping for as distinct. And I'm recognizing what I'm hoping for and how that created some unintended pain for you. And once we go into what I call the four truths, then I can start to tend to your experience and my experience. And I'm not condemning, saying there's badness in you, because that's false. There's just pain and yearning in you. And I'm not condoning, saying I'm okay with it, because I'm actually getting more skillful at pointing to the pain that I'm in and saying I'm not okay with continuing a relationship that brings me so much fear and sorrow. I'm not going to continue to do that. Let's address the unskillful way that you're going about your yearning. Let's address the behavior from the standpoint of you're a good human acting unskillfully, and it creates pain for me. So I'm going to speak to the goodness in you, and you're going to open your heart to me because I can do that. And now we are together saying, how could you fulfill on that yearning without creating pain for me? And how could I fulfill on my yearning without creating pain for you? I had a couple who their great breakthrough was they found ways for him to express how heartbroken he is when she feels misunderstood by him. That was not him screaming at her and chasing her down the hallway. Prior to that, they'd come to me and she'd said he's abusive, and he'd said I'm abusive, right? That was their conclusion. But we got really skillful, and we recognized that the way he went about expressing his upset created fear for her. To want to express upset is a really beautiful, valid yearning of any heart. We all want it. We all need to express our upset, and for our upset to be seen by those that we love. And we can strive to do it in a way that doesn't create pain. So they agreed on some ways that he would express his upset and she could understand his upset that didn't lead her into fear. And his needs were met because he just gets to express his upset, and she recognizes it and can stay open to it. And her needs can be met because she doesn't ever have to retreat down the hallway and lock herself in the bedroom. Prior to that, we just had this label of abusive, and it did nothing for us, actually. It did nothing for them to label someone as abusive. She's the victim, he's the villain. It didn't lead to resolution.
Yeah.
So they just got willing.
You think it might. Oh, now we know, but it's like, oh, we still feel this way.
Yeah. It doesn't. The conclusion about it's like there's great merit in understanding our attachment style, but if you just understand attachment styles, then it's just there's a me and a you, and we're different. A red team and a blue team. There's separation. Understanding your attachment styles might then creatively lead you into understanding, how do I express my yearning in a way that doesn't create pain for you? For example, a great way to see attachment styles play out is that one partner, say the avoidant partner, in order to find safety, they will retreat and shut off and turn away and go missing and go quiet and whatever other ways of like avoiding, which is just an unskillful commitment to peace, right? I'm going to turn away because I'm in overwhelm. I need to feel like I'm not made wrong all the time. I don't have the language to deal with this conflict. I don't want to make it worse. I'm feeling upset and I don't know what's going on for me. So I'm actually taking myself away. The anxious partner may well then go, well, I actually want safety by resolving it with you right now. So come back here. Don't leave me. How dare you, right?
Yeah.
Both humans are yearning for safety, and both are suffering with pain, right? So just to label one as avoidant, one as anxious, through what I read out there in social media, it's like the anxious attachment person feels like is seen as more valid and the avoidant is like less valid. Anyway, just that's what we do. That's what the mind does, is like a winner and a loser all the time. But each of those people really could just start to ask the question, how might I go about trying to find safety in a way that doesn't create this upset for you? So the anxious person might say, how might I go about seeking reassurance so that I feel like you're still here with me, so that I can relax in a way that doesn't create overwhelm for you, that you have to run away from? And the avoidant person might say, how might I go about my yearning for safety by pulling away in such a way as it doesn't leave you feeling abandoned? Both people's yearning get honored there. They're just wanting safety. There's not ill intent behind what they do. It's just there's this unintended upset that is created. And tuning into unintended upset is really the secret. A quick story about unintended upset that is kind of my little analogy at the moment. I was on the beach in Sri Lanka in November going for a dawn run on the beach like I did every morning. And every morning there are crabs scuttling up and down from the surf. And on this particular morning, there's a really big crab. It's like lots of little crabs, but here's this big crab. And I was like, I've never seen such a big crab here in all my runs. So naturally, it's, the sun's coming up and I'm like, I don't want to step on the crab. So I veer to the left and the crab runs to the right. But the crab running to the right, because I veered left, gets it into the waves and the wave washes it straight under my foot. And in the next step, I stomp on the crab and destroy it. So for someone to say that I'm a crab destroyer would leave me feeling misunderstood, right? For someone to say that I just had the most wonderful intentions, so it doesn't matter that I stepped on the crab, that's not the whole truth either, because I've actually killed the crab. The truth is, in my yearning to not kill the crab, I killed the crab. That might sound ridiculously incongruent, but that's the nature of all conflicts. In my yearning to be understood by you, I've left you feeling as if I don't want to understand you. In my yearning for safety, I've left you feeling unsafe. In my yearning to feel validated, it's like you feel blamed. We're always yearning for something as valid as avoiding stepping on the crab. And in conflict, we're always creating some unintended pain that we never hope for. So you'll notice in those times where in a relationship of yours that you care about, if someone comes to you and says, how dare you be so insensitive? Your natural tendency is to go, how was I insensitive? Because we naturally tune into our yearning. But what lies out of our view is the unintended upset that we create for others.
Yeah. You had a beautiful video on that intention and being...
Yeah. And until we get curious, so if we want to be masterful in conflict, we need to get curious about what's the unintended upset I might have just created for you. And to do that, for me to really feel over into the pain that you might be in, I also need to reassure myself that I didn't want that pain for you. My yearning is beautiful, and I created pain for you through what I did. I didn't want to step on the crab, and I stepped right on the crab. Or, another variation is like, have you ever got home late at night when you're living with housemates or whatever, got home 2:00 in the morning, maybe a little bit drunk or whatever, and you're like, you go to make a cup of tea, but you're trying to be so quiet. And in trying to be so quiet, you drop the cup. Like if you hadn't been so careful, you wouldn't have smashed the cup, and you wake everyone up and you're like, I was trying to be so quiet. So the truth of the matter is that I was yearning to be quiet and I woke everyone up. That's the truth. And so that it takes practice to actually start to learn to hold those two things. Once we can do that, we can also turn it around and say, I'm upset by what you did, and I'm getting curious about what you'd actually hoped for.
Yeah, man.
As distinct pain.
I love it. I love the way you communicate these things, these topics, and I think it's much needed in the world for sure. When would you say is it time to really part ways, to give up maybe on a relationship? Like what are some of the signals? Because I feel that go on.
There's a lot of I've noticed there's a lot of relationship advice out there in the world, and I just don't give it, because how would I know when it's time for you to give up? But what I will say is I will encourage you to get very curious about your pain and their yearning, and their pain and your yearning. Very curious about, because those four truths lie out of our awareness normally. We're just making love with our assessment. Once you get really curious about what lies in the heart of another and what lies in your heart, when you go into that, if you find that we can't find ways for me to fulfill on my yearning in a way that doesn't upset you, or we can't find ways for you to fulfill on your intentions without it upsetting me, then maybe we reconsider. But most people are lost in the analysis about what a such and such they must be, because look at how what they did has hurt me. And that's analysis. That's the conclusion. I'm putting a post out, I think it's coming out tomorrow, that just says, the more certain and simple our conclusion about them is, the more it's grounded in ignorance. Because the truth of the matter, in any moment of conflict, the truth of the matter is that it's complex and very nuanced. There's a whole lot of things going on for them, pain and yearning, and there's a whole lot of things going on for me, pain and yearning, and most of that lies out of our awareness. and we're using the data that our mind gives us, which is like, you're an asshole. And that's not all the available data. So get curious about complexity and nuance, and then you're getting closer to reality. So I would always just encourage couples or friends or whoever's asking, get really curious about the humanness in them and the humanness in you, and then decide.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rely on your conclusions or the way that social media supports you in your conclusions about this kind of person is always seeking this and they're horrible and you should run, because it's actually a crock. Like, it's much more complex and nuanced than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, at what distance can you find safety in that relationship?
Yeah.
At what distance? Can you be right up snuggled next to them and feel open-hearted? Or do you need to be out of contact forever, like that ex-partner I was talking to you about? She needed to be absolutely, completely distant from me in order to start to feel open in her heart again. And good on her, actually. It's not what I wanted, but I can guarantee that she was seeking safety, and I want that for her. I want her heart to be open again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the question is, at what distance from this person can I open? Do I need to be right miles away? Or can I be a little closer, or can I be right up close? And that's a question of personal responsibility. And people don't tend to like that. Like when I say, at what distance have you located yourself to this person who is causing you all this upset? They're like, well, I've been married to him for 20 years. And I'm like, okay, at what distance do you need to be? And they're like, what are you talking about? I just want to complain about what an asshole he is. So see how we're kind of not willing to accept that we chose the distance.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's like me driving my $100,000 sports car right up to a driving range at a golf course, and then getting angry when a ball hits my car. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah. Taking it back to personal responsibility, it really is on us, right? Yeah, man. I love it. I respect your time, and yeah, I mean, we could keep going, of course. I've got so many questions for you. I think you've got an answer for every one of them, and it's beautiful to be in your presence.
Thanks for listening to me ramble.
No, it's been a joy, and I love connecting with you. Hopefully, we'll get in person one day, and yeah, I think you're doing a service, and you're living what you do. So it really comes through in the way you hold these conversations, and obviously the spaces that you have with each other. Yeah, anything you want to point people to, where to follow you, where to find you, maybe join you on a retreat or an online program you've got coming up, I think?
On Instagram, I'm James_Fish_Gill. And I have a 9-week group coaching program starting on the 9th of May that there are some spots left to join. And I have on the 24th of May in Bali a 4-day and 4-night conscious communication retreat called Come Back to Love. And there's a few spots left on that as well. So they're the two opportunities to work with me soon.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been such a joy, man. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you do, and the inspiration that you put out there, and the way you engage people doing interesting things. Really appreciate you.
Good, man. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Enjoy the rest of your day, brother. Thanks for listening and watching, people. Please hit that subscribe button. That's the best way to help me. It's the easy and cheapest way to help me and support the podcast and the growth of this channel, which will allow me to get more impactful guests on and in the hot seat. So I've got a men's community. This is happening online. I've created this space for men to dive into just about all the aspects of themselves, to create a trusted, safe space so we can celebrate our wins and own up to our challenges and difficulties. This is going to create spaciousness in our bodies and minds, and it's going to call us in to get to know ourselves a bit more. If this sounds something like you want to be a part of and you resonate with me and my message, then please hit the link in the bio, men's community. It's starting in April.